we're going to be talking all about Earth Day. And we're talking with two folks from Earth Day Network, and they can tell you all about their program and what they work on. And we're super excited about it. So we've been collaborating today in bringing you the cool scientists that we've been hearing from. So one other point is that Skype a Scientist is a nonprofit organization that brings science communication and science access to as many people as humanly possible. And we're completely donor supported. So if you can support us at patreon.com/SkypeAScientist, that allows us to exist. Or if you want to do a one-time donation instead of a monthly support type situation, you can go to paypal.me/SkypeAScientist. And with that, ladies, take it away.
Awesome. Well, we just want to do some quick introductions, and then I'm going to give you guys a very quick little presentation about the history of Earth Day so that you know kind of why we're celebrating this 50th anniversary, and then a couple of great ideas for how you can celebrate Earth Day from home because of the coronavirus. So to start, my name is Kerry. I'm the education coordinator here at Earth Day Network. My background is in geology and earth science, so I love earth systems and rocks and minerals. Those are my jam. But I got my master's in environmental studies because I really wanted to make sure that I was using my knowledge and passions to help protect the earth. So I'm really excited to be in a job where I get to teach people about the earth and give them great ideas for how they can protect it.
Great, thanks, Kira. And my name is Tracy Ritchie. I am Director of Education for Earth Day Network. And I got my background actually in wildlife ecology. So my undergrad degree was studying wildlife, and I thought I was going to be a wildlife biologist. And then I started working with sea turtles, and I realized how the power of environmental education could inspire conservation action and get more people excited about the environment. So I got my master's degree in environmental education and eventually went on to get my PhD in climate change education, so we could think about new ways to teach about climate and the environment in a complex way, because the environment is a really complex system. So working on new ways to think about that. So very excited to be here today.
Awesome, thanks Tracy. So I think Tracy's gonna share her screen so I can show you guys some cool slides that have some fun pictures from the 70s.
Cool, so before you do, give Sarah a chance to sign to the people who are about to use the ASL. So if you want to use ASL, when Tracy shares a screen, look at the top right of your screen and you'll see different options for view, and you click around in there until you see everybody's face. All right. Awesome, okay, go forth.
Thank you, Sarah.
Awesome. So while Tracy's doing that, so just to start, Earth Day's history is really unique and really interesting. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of that. So the first Earth Day, if you are really good at math, you know that 50 years ago was in 1970. So in 1970, there were so many things going on, but leading up to that, in the early 1900s, all over the world, we were starting to see industry really booming. And so with that, we were seeing this huge uptick in pollution and environmental degradation. And so around the 50s and 60s, people started to really notice this and see that the environment around them had become really toxic and really unhealthy for humans. So Silent Spring by Rachel Carson was a really foundational piece of history. It was a book that came out that was really trying to bring attention to how toxic these chemicals were that we were putting in our environment, both to human health, but both to the environment, to the species in our environment. We also went to the moon for the first time in the 60s, in the late 60s, and this awesome picture of the Earthrise got sent back to Earth, and that was the first time that people really saw our planet as kind of this small, fragile little dot in space. And so that was the first time people were thinking, maybe our Earth is a little more fragile and vulnerable than we initially thought. And then in 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio actually caught on fire because it was so polluted that it had become flammable. Also in 1969, there was the Santa Barbara oil spill, which was a huge environmental disaster off the coast of California where oil had polluted the environment. Socially, the era of the 60s and 70s was really ripe with civic action. The civil rights movement was going on where people were fighting for equal rights in the United States. And also the Vietnam War was going on, where college students and people around the US really wanted to make their voices heard about their opinions on the Vietnam War. Tracy, if you want to go to the next slide. So Gaylord Nelson saw all of these pieces coming together. He was a senator from Wisconsin, and he saw the Santa Barbara oil spill and thought that the United States really needed a day that was dedicated to protecting the environment. So he put together an amazing team of bipartisan senators and students from around the country who were going to organize this national teach-in for the environment. So he hired Dennis Hayes, who was a student at the time, and without social media, without the internet, they were able to get 20 million Americans to go out into the streets and say that environmental protection was important. And by the end of that year, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act had been passed, the Environmental Protection Agency got formed, and people really woke up to a lot of these issues that were impacting our environment and said, this is important and we need to change our behavior. Next slide. So this year, we initially had lots of plans to have rallies and festivals and concerts and cleanups. And unfortunately, with the coronavirus, we have had to change a lot of our plans, but we are still super excited to have our 2020 Digital Earth Day, which will be our first Digital Earth Day in history. So there are tons of ways to get involved. We have our Earth Day daily challenges, which are happening on social media. We have a new idea every day of how you can protect the environment, make your voice heard, and all of that. So make sure you check those out. I definitely want to thank Anna, Sarah, and Christine for coming on today to share their research and their knowledge. It was so incredible to be able to hear from them and ask them questions. So next, I just want to touch on a couple of things that you can do around plastic pollution, climate change, and biodiversity to follow up on their topics. So to start with plastic pollution, there are a lot of great ways that you can make a big difference. One of the first ways, and I know Anna touched on this, is you can always try to find a reusable option. The very first and most important step is to try to reduce our plastic use. So if you can turn down a straw or turn down your plastic utensils, those are always your great first step. Next, you can take part in the Great Global Cleanup. So these are cleanup events that will be happening as soon as we can safely go outside again. We'll be getting out there. So definitely wait until your local municipality has decided that it's safe, and then we'll have those great events. In terms of making your voice heard, you can call your representatives and let them know that you want them to support policies that reduce the amount of plastic pollution going into our environment and hold businesses and industries accountable for their plastic waste. You can also use your voice to call your favorite businesses, to email them and let them know that you want them to take on more sustainable packaging, to have better options for you to use, and just really using your power as a voter, as a consumer, and really just as a citizen of the earth to make people know what you want. And then for climate change, oh gosh, there's so much that we can do. I know that the topic can be very scary and kind of overwhelming sometimes, but there really are a lot of great ways that you can make a difference. So first is to make your voice heard. Talking to your family and your friends and your neighbors makes such a huge difference. Humans are very social creatures, and we're really highly influenced by what the people around us are doing and talking about. And so taking these opportunities to share with our friends that the environment is important to us and that climate change is a serious issue that we need to act on actually makes a huge difference on the behavior of people around us. Another way that you can make a difference is adopting a more plant-based diet. So we like to say that we're trying to fight climate change with diet change. And so adopting a more plant-based diet helps because we're protecting environments that are actually being destroyed and cleared to provide more grazing land for agriculture and for meat and dairy production. And so by eating plant-based foods, we're actually lowering our carbon footprint. Another great way to fight climate change is talking to your school administration or school district, or if you have a job, your employer, and finding ways for them to reduce their carbon footprints. Really making sure that they know that their community is calling for these kinds of changes can really influence them to act. Those are just a couple ideas. There's of course way more things that you can do, but that's just a great place to start. So finally, with biodiversity, again, so much that you can do to protect biodiversity both around the world, but also in your local community, in your backyard, around your schools and your community centers. So one of the first ideas is to plant a pollinator garden to help keep the insects and the birds in your community healthy. Pollinators are these really important pieces of our habitats that facilitate the reproduction of plants in our ecosystems, and these plants are the foundation of a healthy ecosystem. They provide food both for other species and for humans. Plants give us the clean air that we need, and they do so much. So keeping our pollinator populations healthy really keeps our entire ecosystems healthy. Another way you can help support biodiversity is asking your parents or schools to stop using toxic pesticides and single-use plastics. So these are huge ways to help pollinators and animals in your area stay healthy and make sure that they're not becoming exposed to toxic pesticides. There are a lot of really great, environmentally safe alternatives to managing pests in our gardens and our crops. And also keeping plastic out of our ecosystems to make sure that animals and plants aren't being bogged down with all this plastic pollution. Lastly, you can contact your representatives, both at your local scale, state scale, or nationally, to support policies that are protecting species and ecosystems. We want to make sure that the policies or the ecosystems in our backyard and around our communities are being protected and cherished as our spaces that we've grown up in and that we love, but also these ecosystems around the world that provide so much biodiversity. They provide ecosystem services, and we really want to make sure that our businesses and our governments are working to protect those at all times. So those are a couple of quick ideas for how you can work on these issues, and then we definitely want to take lots of questions about how you can celebrate Earth Day. We'd love to hear your ideas. So I think we'll go ahead and open it up. But Tracy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think we'll leave it there. We do have a couple of ideas. We have a lot of plans for this week and on next Wednesday, exactly a week from today, of ways to get involved. Some that were covered in the previous presentations, such as we have a new citizen science app for your smartphone, where you can help us collect data on plastic pollution and air quality. We have digital resources if you're trying to do online learning at home with your classmates or your parents. So we have tons of content, we have tons of ideas, but we'd love to hear your questions and your ideas of how you can celebrate Earth Day 2020 in a digital space.
Awesome. So our first question is, how many rivers have caught on fire from pollution?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that. I know the Cuyahoga River's caught on fire a couple of times, more than once.
Oh, yikes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the answer to that, Tracy?
I don't have an answer to that. I don't think the Cuyahoga River was the only river. It was the most famous one in the United States because there was a lot of news coverage of it at the time in the late 60s. But I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, if other countries have experienced that problem as well. The really fascinating part about Earth Day starting in 1970 is that before that, the EPA did not exist. So the EPA, the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency here in the United States, was a result of that first Earth Day. Earth Day happened in April of 1970, and the EPA was formed in December. And through the formation of the EPA, we got landmark legislation and actual enforcement of policy to regulate contamination of our environment to make sure that that didn't happen again. So I wouldn't be surprised before the EPA and in other countries that didn't have that kind of enforcement if that's happened in other countries.
Cool. Our next question is, I work at a university and we want to celebrate Earth Day. What suggestions do you have?
That's a great question, and we have so many resources for you. So we have a whole program called Mobilize U. So it's the Mobilize and then the letter U to help you on campus to activate with your faculty, with your administration, if you have a sustainability center on your campus. So there's plenty of ways, even now in a virtual space. One of the ways is we're asking people to host a teach-in. And so the first Earth Day in 1970 was called an environmental teach-in, and they wanted people to come together as communities to discuss the issues that were impacting them and how the community itself can come up with ideas to take action on those issues. And so through platforms like Skype and Zoom and Google Hangouts and all the digital resources we have available to you, I really encourage you to find your classmates, find other people from your campus, and talk together about how can you make your campus a more sustainable institution, from what is used in your dining halls for your food packaging, but also the food itself, to operations, to where you get your energy from, to the curriculum that you talk about. One initiative that we're supporting right now is called Make Climate a Class. And so we're hoping that professors and faculty and K-12 teachers as well give some attention to climate change, environmental issues, and not just science teachers. This can't just be all on science teachers to teach this content and figure it out. We need English teachers, literature, economics, sociology, psychology. Every discipline under the sun can talk about the environment as an issue. So if you go to our website, which is earthday.org, really, really easy, and search for Mobilize You, we have tons of content for university students.
Awesome. So can you give us one more time the name of that app so we can know where to get information on that, and I'll type it out into the questions.
That's great. So the app, the citizen science app we have, is Earth Challenge 2020. And the 2020 is important because there's another app called Earth Challenge. So Earth Challenge 2020. And I bet I could even pull it up on my phone. I have a very old iPhone that's very broken, but you pull it up, you find some information, and then in there we have plastic pollution and air quality in there. So you can help us collect data on that. And it's available on Apple and Android in the app stores.
Very cool. Let's see. Do you have any suggestions on how to engage more people with sustainability?
Kira, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think one of my first suggestions is not being afraid to talk about it. So I think a lot of times, people aren't sure what other people think about it, so they're hesitant to talk about the fact that they're passionate about this or that it's a concern for them. And I think my first suggestion would be to bring it up. Bring it up at dinner, at your family conversations, on a lot of these Zoom calls we're now having with our aunts and uncles and our grandparents. Just being willing to talk about it with people, I think, breaks down a lot of divide that people are having. Other ways to get involved, I think, are to find nonprofits in your area that are doing really great work already and to volunteer with them, get internships with them, finding ways to just really dip your toes into a lot of the work that's being done. And it's amazing because every topic under the sun touches on environmentalism. So if you're really interested in economics, there's still a way to engage with green and sustainability topics in that. And there's, science and environmental art. There's all of these different ways to engage. So just finding groups that are doing this work and finding ways that you can contribute your skills.
Cool. Are there any great resources for planting a pollinator garden?
Yes, we just made one actually. So our conservation and biodiversity coordinator just published a pollinator garden toolkit. So it has everything that you need to know about what makes a successful pollinator garden, how to plant one, and all of that. And then we also created a worksheet that can guide you through the process of finding out what your native species are, what plants they need to be most happy and to meet their needs. Pollinator gardens also really need loose material for pollinators to create nests out of so that they can nest and reproduce safely. They also need, of course, water and all of those plants to provide the food and safety that they need. So those can be found on our website, and we can put those up maybe on a link after this as well. But those are some great resources. The National Wildlife Federation also has an incredible resource on certifying your wildlife garden. So after you plan your garden and, once you can get out and go shopping for all the materials and plant your garden, you can then certify it with them and get a nice little sign that says, this garden is really good for wildlife.
Awesome. So here's a question. It's sometimes hard for low-income folks to feel welcome in environmentalism because of financial barriers. So how can we address that and show those people that environmentalism is for everyone?
Absolutely, that is a great question. And I think we've seen a huge surge in the environmental justice movement before this epidemic, but I think this epidemic is also really highlighting all these communities that are underserved and are not having enough resources to stay safe in this pandemic, is also the same communities that are in risk to climate change impacts and environmental inequalities. So I think there's so much that we can do after we come out of this pandemic to really address those issues. The environment is for everyone, and everyone has a vested interest in a healthy environment. And people who are working on these issues need to understand those communities that are most impacted by that and give that special attention. So we want to make sure that every community feels welcome in wild spaces. And I know I've worked with a couple of agencies who are trying to increase their access and their attendance by minority communities at their wild spaces. And there was a lot of pressure on the entity itself to bring the communities to them. And then there was this really big realization that we need to go to the communities. And so not making the pressure on communities to come join us where we're at, but bring nature, bring urban ecology to urban communities and let you see that nature is all around you, even in urban settings. And just doing our best part as environmental NGOs to make sure that our resources are accessible in multiple languages, in no-tech and low-tech versions too, for people who don't have bandwidth and access to high-speed internet. So a lot of NGO communities are really trying to do a honest reflection about our resources, who they're appealing to, the languages that they're available in, to make sure that everyone feels included in the environmental movement, because everyone should be and needs to be included in the environmental movement. So that's a great question.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and add one more thing, that a lot of the suggestions that are out there to be more sustainable and to lower your footprint can be cost prohibitive. So, switching to solar energy, that is a huge cost. And a lot of times if you're living in an apartment or have a landlord, you don't have a say in where your energy comes from. So I would say that don't be discouraged by those solutions, because there's still so many other ways that you can get engaged. And I think using your voice in your community is one of the biggest ways for free that you can really get engaged and have a huge impact on the environmental movement. The collective impact that a community can have if you all come together and decide to make your voice heard is enormous. And so just being able to have that motivation and to come together and decide that you want to see change on something and to really move forward with that together, I think is a great tool.
Great. What would you say that the Earth Day movement's greatest success has been so far?
That's a good question. Tracy?
So I would say that first year in 1970 was the formation of the EPA, having that much grassroots support to demonstrate that the environment was important to the American public and that they wanted something to take care of the environment and protect the environment. That was a huge accomplishment. And then I would say in 1990 was one of the first years that we really went intentionally global with Earth Day. We didn't want Earth Day to just be a US-based initiative. And so in 1990, 141 countries participated in global Earth Day for the first time. Now we have evidence that Earth Day occurs in over 190 countries around the world. So I think just this growth over the past 50 years has been remarkable to see, and to see how all cultures celebrate and acknowledge and commemorate and speak up on Earth Day has been just so phenomenal for us to see. And we actually are careful often to say the word celebrate, because we've had 50 years of achievements, but we recognize that we're not done. We're not celebrating a success that, all right guys, pack it up, we're done with Earth Day. There's so much work to be done, and all these issues are evolving, where some of the issues that we saw in the late 60s that led to the formation of Earth Day were very visible. They were in your face. The smog was awful. The river was on fire. The birds were dying at rapid rates. Though our climate change impacts now are a bit more invisible and long-term and unpredictable and different in different parts of the world. So it's hard to point a finger and say, this is climate change and this is what's wrong and this is how we fix it. So we acknowledge that 50 years later, we still have a lot of work to do, but we're so excited to grow this environmental movement around the world, to have more voices in support of it, to make it bigger.
Great. How can I make my voice stand out to help stop pollution?
To stop pollution? Is that what?
Or advocate for environmentalism in general?
Sure. There's so much that you can do. And what we really like to focus at with Earth Day Network is that civic action is a big part of what we're asking people to do. And civic action is a lot more than just voting. So there's plenty of people on this call probably that aren't voting age yet, or live in countries where they're not in a democracy to cast their vote. And there's just so much you can do for having your voice heard. social media is something that they didn't have in 1970 and still got 20 million people to come out. And so we have social media now. That's a great place to share your message with your friends, your network, your family members. Writing to elected officials, even before your voting age, writing to elected officials to let them know your opinions is really important. And elections that are not just national elections, your school district elections, your sheriff elections, your community mayor elections, those candidates and those elected officials are equally as important to contact. And one thing I learned early is it's important to contact your elected officials, not just when you're angry with them, but when you're happy with them too. So if they're doing something that you like, let them know. They never get those emails. They only get the emails when you're doing something they don't like. So if your elected official is doing something good for the environment, thank them, let them know that you're appreciative of it and that you're supportive of that. You can also speak up with your purchasing decisions and the companies that you support and what you do with your daily habits. So there's so many ways to lead by example, walk the talk, and let your friends and families know that that's important to you.
Awesome. Christine says, hi, I'm a second grade math and science teacher that does Zoom meetings with my homeroom class. Do you have any creative ideas for a quick activity that I can get the kids in attendance to participate in via Zoom?
That's a great question. So a teach-in is a great thing to do via Zoom. If you wanted to identify a local environmental issue that's happening in your community, have the students share their feelings on it and share their ideas of how they can brainstorm what to take action on. Second grade is younger. That's some of the teach-ins that we've seen are university level or high school level that have a little bit more know-how about civic action or environmental systems. But second grade is still a great time to share their feelings. What do they like about the environment? What do they see out their window that concerns them? What would they like to do to be inspired environmental activists? And I know activist is a scary word for teachers, but actors. One thing, the Lorax is also a great book to bring in about understanding, who speaks for the trees, and then we all have a role to play. And I wonder if also there's some, I've seen some great activities for math that I've been seeing as far as, I know tally marks and different counting processes or just adding things they can go outside and do some kind of ecological scavenger hunt in their yard and tally up what they're seeing, whether that's from colors or from numbers or types, that you can do some kind of quantifying activity to see what you're seeing outside their window and how they want to protect it.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too. I think environmental art is a really great way to engage students at that age. A lot of times environmental issues are very complex and hard to understand, and also are tied up in a lot of emotions. Sometimes when our younger students hear things on the news or hear their parents talking about something, it can be scary. So using art as a way to kind of process those emotions, talk about what we're scared about, what our concerns are for the future, but then really channeling it into what are our hopes for the future. I think a cool Zoom activity for second graders would be, to draw your idea of a green, sustainable future. What does it look like? Do we have, green, sustainable flying cars? Are there, second graders are so creative. I'm sure the stuff they could come up with would be amazing. But just really using art and even like poetry, if visual art isn't your students' interest, using these kind of mediums as a way to engage with these topics and give them something fun, hands-on to do while also having these tougher conversations.
Great. What are both of your favorite ways to celebrate Earth Day?
Ooh. That's a great question. The past couple of years, I've done a personal cleanup. So I walk around my neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and I do a cleanup. I'm not going to be doing that this year, just to be extra careful about picking up objects that I don't know where they've been, even with gloves or grabbers. But I love kind of spending the day on social media too. I know that's kind of weird for an environmental educator, but just seeing what everyone else is doing and sharing and giving attention and shout outs to what people are doing. The energy and momentum around Earth Day is just so fun to see around the world. And our website is going to have 24 hours of content moving to see how different communities are engaging with Earth Day around the world. So I'm kind of excited to be glued to a screen on Earth Day, which is a weird option for this year, but just to see what's going on around the world.
Nice.
Yeah, I think under normal circumstances, my favorite Earth Day activity is to go to the mountains. I love being like kind of immersed in a forest and just being surrounded by trees. This year, of course, I am not going to go out to those spaces just to protect park employees and all of those people who kind of want us to keep our distance right now. But I think for this Earth Day, I'm really going to be looking at a lot of our youth leaders. There's so many incredible leaders who are, 15 and under, who just blow my mind at what they've accomplished already and what they're advocating for. And they're really, fighting for the health of their future. And so I'm going to be tuning into a lot of what they're doing and just using them as inspiration to keep going.
Awesome. We've got a great question from Alice. What advice do you have for those struggling with eco-anxiety?
That is a great question, Alice. Yeah, it's really real, and I think it's even more real now as we're kind of confined to our spaces. And I think what I like to try to do is I do try to go outside still a little bit every day. I've got a big dog and a tiny apartment, so I still need to go for walks, and I just make sure I'm social distancing and wear a mask when I go outside. But it's springtime in Washington, D.C., which is just the most beautiful time. So I like to try to just go out and connect to nature and breathe and meditate while I'm outside. But also talking to coworkers like Kira, talking to our whole team at Earth Day Network. We're a really social, interactive network in our organization, and we're usually in each other's offices all day long. And so through the social distancing, which we should call physical distancing, I don't want to discriminate against the social part. We're only physical distancing right now. So making sure we have those connections with each other and talk out what our concerns are and what are these tangible action steps that we can take to have some impact in our world of control when the problems seem so overwhelming. I know when I was back in grad school, every class I took was almost too much information of what was going on, and it was overwhelming, and it led me down, it was overwhelming. So just talking that out with friends and coworkers and colleagues who are interested in the same topics and coming up with what can we do in our own lives to take action on that.
Definitely. I think my answer to that is really seeking out good stories and good news. I think a lot of the stuff that catches the most media attention tend to be the scariest. But if you go online and look for, incredible environmental discoveries or projects or inventions that are coming out, there are so many new things that are coming up that, eat plastic in the ocean, or, plastic bags that dissolve in water. There's so many innovative ways that people are trying to combat environmental pollution, climate change, species protection, all of these things. And if you really go out and look for it, you'll find a ton of it. So I would definitely encourage everybody, if you start to feel a little bit depressed or anxious about the future, to really go out and seek those great stories that can kind of uplift you and give you hope. I would also say it's okay to tune out sometimes. If, sometimes you start to feel really overwhelmed and it's just a little bit too much for that moment, it's okay to say, I need to, emotionally take a break to take care of myself. That's definitely something that environmentalists need to do a lot, to say, okay, it's really going to help me to do a yoga session right now, or to watch a little bit of reality TV. Those things are okay as long as you're recharging yourself in a healthy way so that you can get back to the fight later.
That's great. Yeah, I also find when I'm feeling anxious, doing something to make whatever I'm anxious about better definitely helps.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for planting a rain garden? And can you tell people who may not know what that is, what it is?
Kira, that's you.
Yes, I love rain gardens. Every time I go on a walk with my friends or family, we pass one, I am like, we have to stop, because there's always signs that are fun. So a rain garden, for anyone who doesn't know, is an area in a space that is made specifically to catch rainwater. A lot of times in more urban environments, because of all of the concrete and sidewalks are very impermeable to water. So when we have these big rain events, all of this kind of water that's collected, trash and pollutants and oils, come together and rush through our water system. Sometimes it's too much for our system to catch and filter and really managed in a healthy, safe way. And so these rain gardens are places where that rainwater can pool and then be filtered out through this kind of layered soil system. So the first thing that you need is some really high water tolerant plants. So plants that kind of love to be submerged in water on a frequent basis. And then I know you have a couple layers of soil and rock alternating so that water can slowly filter through. I'm probably missing a couple of things, but if you just Google how to make a rain garden, there's so many different ways. And a cool add to that is that sometimes rain gardens and pollinator gardens can work together. So if you have plants that are really water tolerant that also are great for your native pollinators, you're kind of accomplishing two goals at once, which is very exciting.
Great. Will planting certain types of trees help the environment more?
Sure. So the biggest tip for that is planting native trees in your area. So there are different kinds of trees that are better at sequestering or capturing carbon or grow quicker so they can absorb more carbon and in their wood parts more efficiently. But the more important thing is having plants that are native to that area. So we don't want to plant redwood trees in the middle of the Everglades. So we want to make sure that those trees and plants are specific to that area. That way the animals know how to use them. Pollinators can help make more of them. So it's more important to find the native species to your area, but there are different kinds of, depending on how much woody mass is in the tree itself, it's better at capturing carbon. So that's, you'll see a lot of pine flatwoods in the southeastern United States, just rows and rows of pine trees that are used for other products. They figure out a harvesting schedule for those trees that at a certain point they've captured as much carbon as they can for that rate, and they kind of like level out. And so that's a good time to harvest them to plant new trees. So then that cycle of, I think it's like 20-25 years right now, is the most efficient way to capture carbon.
Great. So are there any posters or materials available for sharing on social media?
Yes, we have tons of materials. So if you go to our website, earthday.org, on the top hand menu, there's a button that says Take Action. If you go to the Take Action page, it has everything that you need. It has maps to register your events. It has maps to register your voice and your impacts and what you did. We've got posters, we've got banners, we've got things to print out. One thing that we would love to see on Earth Day is signs in your window or signs in your yard telling people that you're celebrating Earth Day or that you're making a commitment to the environment. So we have all kinds of different things for posters that you could print out, but you don't need to print out one of ours. You can make your own. So if you want to put something in your window from cardboard you have left around or paper that you're not using, the back of something that you can reuse, cut open in a cereal box or whatever you want, get really, really creative with this. We'd love to see your signs in your window in your yard, and take a picture and send it to us and send it on social media, and we'll reshare it out. So we want to see your input on Earth Day.
Awesome. How can we protect our forests given the current rate of urbanization?
That's a great question. There's ways to protect forests around the world that I would say encouraging policy around protected areas and natural spaces and areas that are forever protected from being developed. That's a great way, again, another civic action you can do to let your elected officials know that this piece of land is important and needs to be preserved in the state that it's in. And using land wisely. So if there is development, making sure that our communities are thinking about multiple use for developed area and that we can have a smaller footprint on our developed area. Population growth is inevitable, development is inevitable, but there's ways to do it smartly in green communities. So there's ways to promote land development that is important, but we can find other ways of really important biologically diverse areas to make sure that they're protected by policy and legislation that they can't be developed.
Yeah, I think I'll also jump in and say that, you know, a lot of our cities that we see now were not designed with environmental protection or our species in mind. And so if there are new developments that you know, are unavoidable, to really have those elements in mind as we design it. You know, there's a lot of great urban planners and architects who have learned ways to design cities that are still really species friendly, that have responsible water management systems. So if it's unavoidable, make sure that it's environmentally conscious. On a global scale, I also want to add that giving Indigenous communities the rights over the management rights over their land is extremely important. So there's a lot of areas around the world where Indigenous communities who have lived and thrived on that land for thousands of years are now being taken away. That land's being taken away from them and, used for development and used for resources. And so really empowering our policymakers around the world and people with power around the world to respect those Indigenous land rights is incredibly important.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my second to last question that I was going to ask about Indigenous rights. Great. So we try to keep these at 45 minutes and we have already been going for 40, believe it or not. So we always ask everybody the same two questions at the end. The first one is, what do you wish everybody in the world knew about your area of expertise? And then what do you wish everybody in the world knew about literally anything? It can be as silly or significant as you'd like.
So Kara and I cheated because we've been watching these programs all day, so we prepared for this. So that was our little trick. So I'm going to do the first one. And what I want everyone to know, and it was something that came up in an earlier presentation, I think in Anna's plastics presentation, about why isn't Earth Day early in the year. Great news, Tiffany. Earth Day is every day. It's literally every day. We can do Earth Day every day. And so the biggest disappointment for me is that I don't go on vacation on April 23rd. I still work April 23rd and April 24th. I work year round. So Earth Day Network makes sure that we put all of our pieces into place to have all of this content all the time. So Earth Day falls on April 22nd, which is exactly a week from today, but Earth Day is also every day. So don't feel constrained that you have to do all this environmental stuff next Wednesday and then no other time of the year. We need to do this stuff every day of the year.
Great. And then the second question, what do we want people to know about literally anything? It took a while for us to decide, but I think one of the most important takeaways about being in the environmental movement is that we see a lot of these examples of youth leaders and people who are involved who are dedicating their entire lives to this, like Greta, obviously such a fan of her, but not everyone needs to be that level. You really don't need to sail across the Atlantic Ocean to speak at a UN event to be effective. There are things that you can do in your shopping decisions, in your everyday life, in the conversations you have with your neighbors and family that are hugely impactful. So we definitely don't want anyone to feel discouraged, oh, I can't make it to that level, so I'm not going to try. Every step that you take is a huge move forward for everyone. I think another piece is just to say that working together is really the only way that we're all going to be able to solve a lot of the problems that we're facing. I think sometimes environmental conversations are, we have to defeat this or fight this, and I really want to make sure that we're also encouraging a lot of collaboration, finding shared values and things that we agree on and things that we care about together is a great way for us all to decide, oh, we agree on this. That's amazing. That's a great step forward. How can we act together on this? Because all of us working together is going to be much more effective than us fighting against each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This was really fantastic. And thanks for joining us all day long for all of these environmental based sessions. So is there anything else that you'd like to get in before the end?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you so much to our ASL interpreters. It is such an honor to be able to work with you all and to be able to reach another audience through your work. And also thank you so much to Skype a Scientist for this partnership. And we're so excited to work with you and be able to offer this incredible day.
Yeah, this was really
a huge day for us. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us again. If you appreciate what we've been up to here, please support us on patreon.com/SkypeAScientist or paypal.me/SkypeAScientist so we can keep all this cool science stuff coming at you all the time. Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, we're talking about how to do science in Antarctica. So join us for that. Okay.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.